Good morning and welcome back to Read Aloud with Miss Cope. Today is Wednesday and it is May 27th. Yesterday was our day back from that 3-day weekend. It was so nice to see and chat with all of you via Zoom. But for now, we're reading It Ain't So Awful Falafel by Firoozeh Dumas. And the chapter we left off on is called, and I remember I had to stop in the middle of a chapter. So the chapter we left off on is called 26 Miles Across the Sea. Zomorod and her friends from Girl Scouts are on a overnight camping trip. All right, the next day we come back to our tents to discover that the feral pigs have visited. There is gooey, sticky saliva all over everything. Even though we're completely disgusted at the slime invasion, we burst out laughing. We had been so careful and the boars came anyway. Luckily, none of our stuff is damaged. It just needs to be washed. My parents don't need to know. Ever since my conversation with Rainey, I can't stop daydreaming about being a CIT next summer. Sailing quickly becomes my favorite activity. I finally understand why everyone in Newport Beach is so into it. Out on the water, with the wind in my face, navigating the tiny vessel, I feel a happiness that I've never felt before, even though my dad has told me all about the dangers of the ocean: sharks, jellyfish, tsunamis, lightning, drowning, rip currents, to name a few. I feel completely safe in that little sailboat. I'm far away from the daily bad news about Iran and from my mother's sadness. I close my eyes for just a few seconds and try to hold onto that feeling. So Zomorod found a hobby, sailing, that makes her feel at peace and forget about the stress and the worries of her everyday life. That's important to have something like that. Next chapter. Oh heck, it's OPEC. After 2 heavenly weeks at camp, when I tanned without even trying, take that, original Sydney, I'm now in the back seat of the Impala, telling my parents about flying fish. They can't believe it either. Suddenly, I see about 50 cars parked in front of a gas station with people standing all around. What is that, I ask. You've missed the big news of the summer, my dad says wearily. Gas lines. The protests in Iran have interrupted the export of oil, and suddenly there isn't enough gas, and it costs more than $1 per gallon. Everyone is so angry, my mother adds. You're lucky we filled up the car yesterday. Your dad waited in line for 2 hours. Less supply and more demand means that the OPEC increased its prices, explains my dad. I'm the only kid in Newport Beach who already knew about OPEC. Since it is unfortunately another branch of my father's favorite subject, I don't wait for Carolyn to call me this time. I call her as soon as I get home. Do you know what OPEC stands for, I asked. No, she says, but do tell, my fascinating friend. Her voice drips with sarcasm. Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. I say, according to my dad, every American should pay attention to what OPEC does, since the American economy is tied to its decision. OPEC decides the price of oil. When the price of oil goes up, so does the price of everything else. Thank you for this captivating phone call, Carolyn makes snoring sounds. If you're going to be a journalist, you need to know the stuff, I say. You're welcome. Hey, you want to go see Rocky 2 at Fashion Island Mall tomorrow, she asks. My mom says she can pick you up at 11:30 for the matinee. Sounds good. I'm totally looking forward to not having to think about OPEC or see my parents' constantly worried faces, even if it's only for a couple hours. Next chapter, Buttercup. That weekend, I'm washing the Impala in our driveway when I hear an enthusiastic, "What's up, Buttercup?" I stop soaking the hubcaps and look over the hood to see Skip, dressed in a light blue plaid shirt, collar up, cheerful as ever, walking his bulldog. Hi, I say. How nice of you to be washing your dad's car. You seem like a kid who doesn't lollygag much. Judging from the words he uses, I'm beginning to think that if I looked in Skip's garage, I'd find a covered wagon. My confused expression may have given that away. What I mean is, you seem like a hard-working kid. Brock tells me you're very smart in school. He said that? Sure did. You're a go-getter. I wish some of your gumption could rub off on him. Brock is really good at things that I'm not very good at, I offer. I don't even know how anyone can stand up on a surfboard. It's all about practice, Skip says. If he practiced math as much as he surfs, he might be a little Einstein. Brock doesn't believe he can be good at school. Like my dad always used to say, can't never did 'cause can't ever tried. I'm not sure how to respond to that. Maybe he will like math more next year. Skip laughs. Hope springs eternal. He starts to walk away, and that means I hope so. See you later, I say, smiling. See you soon, Raccoon, he replies with a wave. Next chapter, 7th grade. And one thing. So, just because you're not great at something in school doesn't mean you're not good at it. That's having a closed mindset. But if you have a growth mindset, if you practice and work super hard, practice your math facts, practice making equations, practice studying, next thing you know, you're going to be a great mathematician. 7th grade. I already know 7th grade is going to be a great year because I am no longer the new kid at school. And thanks to Matt, I have inside information about most of my teachers. I have friends to eat lunch with every day, and I know where all the bathrooms are. Turns out I have 3 classes with Carolyn and 2 with Rachel. None of the subjects seem that difficult. I'm beginning to think that once you have attended school in Iran, you never think tests or assignments in America are that hard. It's like being vaccinated against difficulty. Wow. I go to Carolyn's all the time. We always study first, then play a board game or just talk. Matt is usually holed up in his room studying. Did you know that the name of your street, Vista de Oro, means view of gold? Who cares, Carolyn says. Go away. Have you noticed how so many streets in Newport have Spanish names, but no one who lives on them speaks Spanish, continues Matt. But our street has a view of a school parking lot, I say. Where's the gold? It's called marketing, Matt says. I bet view of parking lot doesn't sound so good in Spanish. I laugh. Don't laugh, Carolyn tells me. You'll only encourage him. Matt ignores his sister. You should take Spanish in high school. It'll help with the vocabulary on the SATs. The what? I ask. The SATs. You take them before going to college, he explains. This is news to me. I didn't know you have to take tests before college. I always planned on learning French since I've already learned English. Why? Matt asks. That's what people do in Iran, so they can study in America or England or France. Plus, all the famous movie stars speak English or French. John Wayne, Elizabeth Taylor, Bridget Bardot, Helen Dillon. Who's the last guy? Matt wants to know. He's a French actor. I guess he's not famous here, but in Iran, if a man is really good looking, you call him an Alan Dillon. Never heard of him, says Carolyn. John Wayne lived in Newport Beach, Matt adds. He just died in June. Really? I had never thought of John Wayne as a real person, but here I am living in the same town where he had lived. Maybe I saw him at the grocery store. He didn't recognize him. It's not like he would have been wearing a cowboy hat to buy a carton of eggs. I probably should take Spanish, I say, because ever since I moved to Newport Beach, people think I'm Mexican. What do you mean? Asked Carolyn. Our neighbor across the greenbelt asked me to tell the gardeners in Mexican that they keep forgetting to trim her hedge. When I say I don't speak Spanish, she was shocked. Carolyn and Matt both laughed. Then I told her that I'm not from Mexico. She looked really confused. I'm from Iran, I said, and she goes, oh, that's nice. I think she probably meant, oh no, not that scary country with a bearded guy, says Matt. I laughed. Stop feeding the beast with your laughter, Carolyn warns. But that was funny, I say. Another time, Mrs. Harris, who lives 2 doors down from us, asked me if I could tell her window washer, Jesus, not to come next week. I told her that I only know how to say lever lo menos, por favor, bien diez, muchas gracias. Do you know what she said? It's a pity you have forgotten your Spanish. I rolled my eyes. Next chapter. 60 minutes. For an extra credit project for social studies, Carolyn is going to interview my dad. This is the first time she's coming over to my place for dinner. I am so happy to finally be doing something for her. I spend a lot of time at her house, and her mother is always driving me places since mine doesn't have a driver's license. My mom has made eggplant stew, lamb shanks, and rice pudding with rose water. Something smells good, Carolyn says as she walks in the door. She is off to a great start. My mother's favorite thing in the whole world is when someone compliments her cooking. Carolyn comes equipped with a tape recorder, extra batteries, a yellow notepad, and sharpened pencils. You are already a great journalist, my dad tells her. After dinner, she takes out her recorder and looks very official. I can tell my dad is excited. He loves to talk about Iran, but no one except Dr. Klein ever wants to listen to his long answers. Before Carolyn can ask a question, my dad jumps in. Let me first tell you one thing, Carolyn. Iran has about 10% of the world's oil reserves. This has been both a blessing and a curse. Why? Carolyn asked, pushing the record button. The history of Iran's oil industry started in 1901 when an Englishman received permission from Iranian officials to explore and develop southern Iran's oil reserves, my dad says. In 1908, the British found oil in southwest Iran, near where I was born, I add. Your claim to fame, says Carolyn, smiling at me. Yes, I say hesitantly, not sure if that is a compliment. My dad continues. This discovery changed Iran's history. I've worked in the oil industry my whole life, and I tell you, Caroline, that if the investment that has been made in the oil industry has been made in educating men and women, Iran would indeed be a rich country today. The greatest resource of any country should always be in people. You see, Caroline, when a precious resource like oil is found, it brings a lot of money quickly, and this brings out the worst in people and governments. Then my father goes through the entire boring history of oil in Iran. I'm amazed that Carolyn managed to look genuinely interested in the whole time. If being a journalist doesn't work out, she can always be an actress. I think about where Iran is today with all this turmoil, and I wonder, what led us here? That is not an easy question to answer. But the greed and the corruption that came with the oil has deeply damaged Iran and its people. Carolyn is still holding her head and writing. My dad then shows her his favorite book, The Petroleum Industry of Iran. We're about to take a detour deep into the Boringville. On this page, you can see large pipes. On the next page, you see large pipes attached to larger pipes. And on the next page, you see large pipes attached to larger pipes with steam coming out of them. He drones on. Now I am certain that Carolyn is only pretending to be interested, but still she's doing a fine job. Once both sides of the cassette tape are used up, she says, "Thank you very much, Mr. Yousafzai. That was the most interesting 60 minutes I have had in a long time. I will always think of you when I go to the gas station." I giggled, but my dad seemed very pleased to hear that. As Carolyn starts to put away her notebook, my dad says, "Caroline, I have one more thing to say. If I have one son and daughter and could only educate one of them, I would educate my daughter. You know why? A girl without an education has no power. She is always at the mercy of others." Carolyn takes out her notebook again and writes that down. I am the luckiest girl in the world. Next chapter, October 23rd, 1979. My dad and I are driving to the hardware store, listening to the radio as usual. The disc jockey suddenly announces that there is breaking news. I just know it's going to be about Iran, and I'm dreading it. He says that President Carter has allowed the Shah to come to America for a cancer treatment. I can't believe it, my dad says. According to the journalist, the Shah has lived in Egypt, Morocco, the Bahamas, and Mexico since leaving Iran. Can you believe this, Zomorod? No country wants to keep him. He used to be welcomed in nations around the world with red carpets and military salutes, but now he doesn't finish his sentence, just shakes his head. Who could have ever thought that a person could be so powerful, then completely powerless all in the same time? So, the Shah has cancer, and America is the only country that's letting him in for treatment, apparently. So, Zomorod has finished her first Girl Scout camping trip for more than a week without her folks. She also invited her friend over to interview her father, just like a real journalist. And she is learning, I'm learning more and more about Iran and the history of Iran. So this is super, super interesting, and I am loving this book as we keep reading. So the next chapter, which we'll pick up tomorrow, is called Halloween 1979. I will see you then. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the beautiful day. Toodles.